Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round one prop and betting stream for the Tour Championship. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your bets tomorrow with a look at the conditions from last year, a weather report for round one, also a full deep dive at the Underdog and PrizePicks boards, and some matchups on the sports book. So pretty much a taste of everything that you need. But any specific questions on top of that you're curious about, feel free to go ahead and let me know in the chat. That could be any bets you want me to deep dive, any sort of players or process-based questions you have on top of that as well. And even if you don't have any questions and you just want to say hi down there too, then that's okay as well. But I hope that you guys are having a fantastic week and are ready to talk golf for what is the last regular event of the season. Of course, we do have the Fall Swing, the Ryder Cup, some random events here over the next few months, but football probably going to be a lot of our main focus. So it'll be switching to that side on the YouTube side here over the next week or so, but super stoked for the golf side until then. So feel free to hit me up with those questions and let's go ahead and get this thing going. So first things first would be the averages from last year, which have to be taken with a grain of salt because this was a par 71 last year. It was renovated before last year's event. They completely redid a lot of the golf course. They changed up the agronomy, completely different green complexes, and with them moving it to a par 71, it was a lot easier as a result. So scoring average was minus 2.38, but it is worth noting that here in 2025, it's going to be played as a par 70 instead. So one of the three par fives is changed to a par 4 this year. And although it will be a little bit shorter on that hole, the raw scoring average probably isn't going to change very much. So as opposed to it playing minus 2.38, if we make that one stroke difference there, it plays probably about minus 1.38, but that also impacts a lot of these other averages. Your birdie average is probably going to drop by like 0.5 to even 0.6 per round. So something around like 4.1 to 4.2 birdies are better per round. Bogey average also going to go up a little bit as well, probably about 0.3 to 0.35 bogeys or worse per round. So something around 2.5 to maybe 2.6 bogeys or worse being made by the field. But even with all of that, still playing under par. I don't think this course is going to be overly difficult, especially when we talk the weather here in a second, which is really going to impact how this course projects. But even without the weather impact, the course was about an 8 fairway average. That probably wouldn't move that much. They didn't renovate the course since last year. And then the green regulation average, that would go down a little bit. That par 5 was pretty much a gimme green regulation. This time around, it might be like a 50-50 prospect as it's going to be a 500-yard par 4, but maybe going down to like 11.5 per round, like 11.4, 11.5 is about as far as I would push it. And when we consider the weather, I think it's actually going to make up for some of that difference. So not only does it look extremely calm in Atlanta tomorrow, sub 10 miles an hour winds the entire day, a little bit of a storm that's supposed to come through in the afternoon, but after a lot of play is already finished up. So weather looks ideal there. But today they actually just had to call off play at the Creator Classic because they were getting a bunch of rain in, about a half an inch of rain over the last hour. And then yesterday they got 0.7 inches of rain as well. So that's over an inch over the last 24-hour period, which is going to make this golf course a lot soggier. So the greens, which were pretty firm last year, anytime we have a renovation to a golf course, they tend to be a little bit bouncier right off the bats. They're not going to be as bouncy after the rain this course is gone. And also the fairways are going to be easier to hit as well. So to go back to those averages, that minus 1.38, I actually think there's a chance it plays easier than that sort of a scoring average because of the kind of weather that they have heading in. So I personally have the range on the scoring from about minus 1.25 to minus 1.75. Minus 1.5 being the midpoint there, so probably the most likely outcome. Your birdie average, something between 4 to maybe 4.5 per round. So a rather large window there compared to a lot of the slates, but I think there's a little bit of an unknown with this sort of a golf course. Bogey or worse average, probably between 2.4 to 3 per round. Also pretty big average, but I want to be safe with these projections. And then your fairway average and green average, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. I think the fairway average is going to go up a bit because, it's not a difference changing the par in a hole on whether you're going to hit the fairway or not. And with the softer conditions, I think it's going to be between 8.25 to 8.5 fairways hit per round. That's my take on it. I think it'll go up a little bit. And then the green and regulation rate, I think that's going to stay about 11.9 per round. I actually don't think that one's going to move all that much just because of the softer conditions. And although that one par hole, the par 5 that's now par 4 is going to be harder to reach, the rest of them are going to be easier to hit because of all the rain the golf course has gotten. So that one, I have it about the same exact number to give you guys an idea of how I'm projecting this course. And we didn't quite have the pin locations yet. They're probably probably dropping any second now that we'd be able to go through them. But round one, they're not going to burn all of the hard pin locations, and they're also not going to make it a moving day setup either. It's not going to be like it's set up for birdie bonanza. It's also not going to be set up like it is on Sunday, where they want the golf course to have some teeth. I think looking at last year's averages, maybe making slight adjustments based on the weather and the change in par are about as far as that we want to take it. So I feel pretty good about those projections that we just went through. And it's a combination of the fact that the weather looks absolutely ideal and the fact that the golf course isn't really going to change all that much at all. And though that par change is going to like make the birdie and bogey averages look a whole lot different, the hole itself is going to play the exact same, right? So how I got those projections, by the way, and kind of adjusting for those from what we had last year is I just looked at the raw numbers from the year before, right? Everything that was a birdie last year is now going to be a par this time around. Anything that was a par last year is now going to be a bogey this time around. And I just adjusted for that, right? With the averages, right? It might be a little shorter. So in fact, it might actually play a little bit easier than those averages that I calculated, but I'm not going to try and, project what that 15 to 20 yard difference looks like. I'll project it towards the harder side and, use that as a worst case scenario, if anything. So that's what I'm looking at with the conditions for Thursday. Friday, we'll of course have our live stream tomorrow night, but for DFS purposes, I went through it over there on the other live stream. It also looks pretty flat, a little bit of a chance of some PM showers as you always have in Atlanta this time of year, but weather looks extremely flat for the first few rounds. Now let's go through some exposure I've already entered. And if you guys caught the Bet the Number article that I did last night, that was posted at about 9 p.m. Eastern time. We had Rory McIlroy for the under on strokes and also a Sam Burns under on strokes. Unfortunately, both of those already bumped by 0.5. So for the sake of this live stream, to kind of spice it up a little bit, I am going to give you guys different leans than the ones that we went through over there. But that was the idea, right? With the wet golf course, the super calm conditions, I was targeting some of these positive stance plays. And whether it's on Underdog or on Prize Picks, where I've already taken a bunch of exposure at this stage, there's been a lot of bumps in our favor. So you'd like to see that. The sportsbook line value is also behind a lot of the plays that we've taken. So anytime you're getting those bumps, you're seeing that sort of juice on the sportsbooks get more and more as the week goes on. That's how you know you're on the right sort of leans. And now that the golf course is going to be even softer, I was actually not even projecting for there to be a storm this afternoon. Most of the softness was what actually went through the course on Tuesday, where they got about that 0.7 inches of rain that I was mentioning before. But now that they've gotten an extra half an inch to an inch over the last hour or so, this golf course is going to be even easier than what I thought it was before. So although props like a Rory, Sam Burns have bumped and maybe the value isn't quite there as much anymore, there's other value on stuff that hasn't bumped yet that I think is even better than when I took it earlier this week. So we'll definitely go through a few of those. It's worth noting, though, that Rory is over here on Underdog. So if you want to bet him at that number, you can. The issue is that with Sam Burns, he does have a multiplier towards the under. In fact, actually, they took that strokes line for him off the board. Well, you can enter Rory McIlroy over there. So we're going to enter some other props. Maybe you can mix in something with Rory on Underdog if that's where you get your exposure. But unfortunately, Prize Picks ended up moving a lot of that on us already. What's going on, Tom? You said Harris English or an under on 69. So there are other guys at 69 I'd rather have than a Harry English. English, decent form heading in. Like, I don't really want to, shit talk him too much there. But we've also got guys like Tommy Fleetwood at 69 strokes. And considering that Fleetwood's gaining like 2.6 shots gained per round, like, if you could tell me I could take Tommy Fleetwood or a Harry English for the under, like, I'm going to lead towards that Tommy Fleetwood side. So we're going to go through some props, a few other ideas that I actually am getting to, but the general sentiment of an under on strokes, I'm not going to give you too much pushback on. You're looking at an under on Spawn and Rose at 69.5. Spawn is at 69. I'm okay with those two, but kind of like I said there with Tom, there are players that I think are just slightly better value, like especially like the 69 for Spawn. You've got guys like Fleetwood at that number, other elite tier players at 69 strokes that I would just rather have than those two in particular. And at 69.5, I also think that there's maybe better players that you could take than Justin Rose. Not to talk too much smack on Rose, but he's a bottom 10 player in this field. This is the top 30 players in all the tour that have made it to this point. So yeah, be a little bit more selective about it, I would say. But in general, like the positive stance plays that you guys are looking at is, I think, the right side of it. You're looking at JT under 69.5. I mean, if you were getting even money at 69.5, I'd be willing to take that, but I don't think there's any sports books that have them up at that number. So maybe one of the smaller books, like a parlay play, has that kind of line available. But on the sites like Underdog, Prize Picks, or the sports books where he's like minus 130 juice, I think that it's decent value. Like I would still even lean on that direction because as you'll see here in a second, there are going to be some guys at 69.5 that we're taking for positive stance plays. But with the payout shift, like I think he is on every single sports book, like it takes away from some of that value. So you'll have to let me know what sort of market you're considering that for, because that really makes it. And I could tell with like these 69s that you're looking at Prize Picks, right? Because Underdog doesn't have 0.5s on it. The sports books, they always have the 0.5s on it, right? They're not going to have those even number ones. You have to let me know with that because it really depends on the payout that you're getting. Rory is still at 68.5 on Underdog. Yep, as we were saying. And Sam Burns is 11.5 greens. Yeah, the greens bet's completely different than taking the strokes bet. But yeah, if you want to use that as your combo, you can. That's obviously at your own discretion if you're going to choose to take that sort of a line on Sam Burns. Thoughts on Scotty for the over on fairways? He's minus 135 on DraftKings. Yeah, that was the first prop that I took this week, actually, Matt. So I posted that on my Patreon page on a Monday when we first got the board. And he said 0.85x on Underdog. So I took him on Underdog when he was even money. So that 0.85x had a lot of my doing behind it. But yeah, on Prize Picks at the even money mark, like that is totally a playable line. And in fact, because we went ahead and spilled the beans on that one, I guess we can make that one of the props that we use here in the live stream. But I'm for sure behind you on that one. He's the sort of player that ranks top 50 on tour in driving accuracy. The average I have in the 8.25 to 8.5 range. That rain, that softness is at least going to make it go up a little bit. So at least 8.25, I think, is very reasonable. And even if it is only an 8.25 average, Scotty Scheffler's top 50 on tour in the category, well above average, projecting for 8.75 to 9 fairways per round, let alone the chance that it does go up to an 8.5 average, or maybe even slightly better than that, where he'd be projecting for like 9.25 to 9.5 fairways per round. So yeah, that was one of the first ones that I bet. And if even money in that minus 135 juice, like I think it's playable even at minus 135 on books, let alone when you can get them for even money like we did on those sports books. He said, "What's up, Luke? Nothing much, man. Hopefully you're doing well yourself. You are outright betting on Aubert, Hovland, Griffin, and Bhatia without Scotty." He said, "Any avoids there?" So I really like Hovland this week, and Ben Griffin is one of my core plays. So those two would probably be my favorites. Bhatia and Aubert, I'm more like lukewarm on, but I'm not really like sour on either of those two plays. Like I'd put them at worst, maybe like a 5.5, a 5 out of 10 if I was being really nitpicky about it. So yeah, nothing I would say is overly alarming with those 4 bets that you put in. I do have to say the middle 2 are maybe my favorites, but yeah, nothing I'm going to give you too much crap about there. Winning score is at 265.5, minus 125. So yeah, what is it? A par 70, so 280. That's at like 15 under par then. That makes sense. That sounds about right, I would say. Keegan or English for the over 8.5 fairways. Both are top 65 in accuracy. Kind of like I was saying with Scotty Scheffler in that over, there are just better players to take. So I'm always somebody that tries to be very nitpicky about what I play. Like I don't just play leans, things that I think are, slight value in one direction. I try and find the best value possible. And at 8.5, Jonathan, there are better fairway players. For example, Shane Lowry is top 40 on tour. You have a top 50 in a Scotty Scheffler, and a few other players that are also top 45 in driving accuracy. So while Keegan and English aren't terrible options for that, there are players on the board at that same exact number that are better players in that category. So that's the only thing I would say there, Jonathan. But with the course being softer, I think overs on fairways are the play this week. And there are even guys at 8, by the way, that are juiced under on the sports books that I haven't taken at this point, but I was definitely considering it. Like, for example, Sam Burns, Hideki Matsuyama, Aubert, he's like an average driving accuracy. Robert McIntyre, now this might be my favorite out of all of them. He's at 8, and he is juiced way towards the under 8.5 on books, but I don't agree with that. Like the sports books get a lot of things wrong. You don't have to take them like they're the gospel or anything like that. But he's a better accuracy player than some of these guys they have at 8.5. So that's the sort of player that I would rather take instead. So we're going to stick with the Scotty Scheffler one here for the live stream, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of feedback on those ones. But let's mix in a few props with this. So we're going to take the Scotty Scheffler over on fairways, and we're going to mix it in with an under on Ben Griffin strokes. So Ben Griffin on the sports books is minus 130 towards the under, and he's top 10 in form of anyone in this field. So he's gaining over a stroke per round heading into this event. And while it is his first time playing around at East Lake, this isn't a golf course that has a steep learning curve. It's not like Augusta where you have to have a bunch of experience before you have any chance at really playing well. We've had a lot of people that have shown up to East Lake in their first ever round and have had near nutted performances before. So, and with the scoring average, this is just my projection. Again, it's not like I have a crystal ball and I know exactly what's going to happen, but I think it's going to play between minus 1.25 to minus 1.75, maybe a little bit aggressive, but that's where I have the field average. Ben Griffin only has to shoot -1 to cover this, right? It's going to be a par 70 this time around as opposed to the par 71. Shooting -1 is a slightly worse than average day. And he's top 10 in form heading into this week. He's -130 towards the under in books. And I don't think the sports books have the board priced positively enough. I think that they priced it. And in fact, I know this because they posted the board on Monday after they ended up getting the tee times. And that was before they got any of this rain. The rain that they got this afternoon, also on Tuesday afternoon, that is going to make the golf course a little bit easier. So that's why I like that under on Ben Griffin's strokes. Just have an average day and he's going to cover for us. In fact, it's slightly worse than average day if I end up being right about that projected scoring average. And then with Scotty Scheffler, if it's an 8.25 to 8.5 average, he just has to have a slightly better than average day to cover for us. So I think both of those very reasonable. That'll be a 2.75x slip that we mix in. And I'll give you guys one more that I went with as well. So Cam Young, he's gaining about 2 strokes per round heading into this event. He's top 5 in the field when it comes to form heading in over his last 12 measured rounds. He has to have an average day to shoot 69 strokes and cover this. This makes no sense in my opinion. In fact, you know how like the Sam Burns one, he was at 69.5 and he bumped 0.5 down. Like the Cam Young, the Ben Griffin plays that we just went through are the same exact idea. Both of them are top tier players, top 10 players form wise heading into this sort of a week. If we can just take them to have average days and we're getting well above average players, then those are my favorite leans to take for a PGA pick'em site like this. So let's go with the Cam Young prop. That'll be one that we mix in. And then for the next one, there have been a lot of bumps, so I'm going to have to try and find one that hasn't moved. Let's go with this Tommy Fleetwood prop. So Tommy Ladd at 69 strokes. He is at 68.5 on a lot of the sports books, albeit -145 juice towards the over. So that's why he's at 69. So like, I don't think that this is like a drastic line value or anything, but if I think the scoring average, and this is like what I meant before by like the sports books get a lot of things wrong. If I think the scoring average is going to be at least -1, maybe -1.25 to -1.75, Tommy Ladd, by the way, who's number 2 in form in this field. He's number 2 only behind Scotty Scheffler, gaining 2.65 shots gained per round. If he's averaging over 2.5 shots gained to the field, and by the way, all those events are pretty decent field events. They're all majors or signature fields or playoff events over that 12-round sample size. If he's doing that in these sort of fields to begin with, and an average day is at 69 strokes, then obviously we're going to take him for the under, right? Like that's like the biggest no-brainer in human history if he has that kind of form heading in. And Tommy Ladd's also been pretty good at Eastlake over the years. Now, he's not top 5 in shots gained around here, like a Justin Thomas is, for example, who is somebody that I took for a positive stance play, but he's towards the top third of the field when it comes to shots gained around this course. So yeah, I loved that sort of lean as well. So that's my take on the conditions. I think it's going to play a lot easier. Underdog, there were a lot more bumps over there, so there's not going to be as much exposure to take right now. But if there's any props that you liked over there to mix in with that Rory McIlroy, then by all means, go ahead and mix that in. That would be a prop that I would still certainly get behind at this point. And let's do the same thing that we did with the Tommy Ladd prop, right? And I know I did a whole article on the Sam Burns, which he was a guy at 69.5 that just has to have an average day to cover. That one's pretty self-explanatory. But Rory at 68.5, he is the number 2 player in the field in course history around this course. Number 1 is Justin Thomas. Number 2 is Rory McIlroy, and he's won the Tour Championship 3 times. Now, before this, it was handicapped, so he had a starting stroke advantage in a lot of those different cases. But in terms of raw shots gained per round, because that is what is being kept over there on Data Golf, he's the number 2 player in this entire field. So if there's going to be anyone to go out there and take the gain just a few strokes to the field to cover, it would be a Rory McIlroy. And let's say it only plays -1.25, which was the bottom end of my scale. That's gaining 0.75 strokes to the field. That is well within that range of outcomes of him gaining 2.5 strokes, a little bit over that per round. And then if we take a look at the -1.75 range, let's say it plays towards the easier end of that spectrum, he's only going to gain 1/4 of a stroke to the field to cover. And I know this is an elite tier field, but he's one of the best players at this golf course and one of the best players with form heading in this week. So that was a no-brainer. So if there's anything you guys want to mix in with that, by all means, feel free to go ahead and do so. And then the other thing I want to go through would be a matchup bet that I've already placed. This is a 2-ball bet, and I got this at -110 on Hard Rock Bet. And Hard Rock Bet is offering the odds without the tie market now, which is pretty nice. And I was able to get the same exact number there. But if you go to the last 12 measured rounds between Victor Hovland and Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland is 1.01 shots gained better per round. So he's over a stroke better compared to Collin Morikawa. Morikawa is playing musical chairs with his caddies. He has no idea who's going to be holding the bag for him for any of these given weeks. And if you take a look at the course history, Morikawa is no slouch. I think he's around number 10 with that course history, but Hovland is top 5 in the shots gained around Eastlake. So he's even better in that category, gaining more strokes heading in. So in my opinion, he shouldn't be minus 110 odds. He should be closer to minus 125 to minus 130. So it's not like it's like some drastic value where like, you know, he's plus 200 when he should be like minus money, but still small little value that we can grind out on these sort of 2-ball bets in kind of targeting a player in Morikawa at the same time that is really struggling. I mean, he's losing about 0.9 strokes per round over his last 12 rounds. That is the second worst of anyone in this field. The only player that's playing worse than him over that 12-round sample size is an Andrew Novak, who's losing like 1.5 shots gained per round. Tough scene for him over the last couple weeks. But Morikawa is the second to worst player. So if we're getting even money odds against somebody that is playing that terribly and somebody that's playing well himself, I mean, Hovland's playing the best golf that he's played in all of 2025 right now. And it's at a golf course where he's absolutely killed it over the years. That's why, even though it doesn't look like massive line value on paper, like I think it's worth playing here. You've got a lot of converging trends working in our favor. And Hovland, I was looking at his over on 4 birdies on Prize Picks before I ended up taking that. I ended up going with that exposure instead. He's an above average birdie maker. I think the average for birdies could be in that like 4.25 to 4.5 range. So that's why I was looking at that one. But when I saw this matchup at even money against a player that's struggling like that, it's kind of like that double-edged sword where not only do you get to bet on that player to play well, but you also get the equity of the guy that he's playing against absolutely sucking again. So that's some exposure that I've taken for round 1, guys. It is not by any means all of the exposure that I've mixed in. For every single bet that I take, as soon as I place it, you guys can find that over there on my Patreon page. We've got Underdog and Prize Pick slips posted there for every single slate. Also 2-balls and matchups as well. And all of the stat averages for these events, weather reports as well. They help you out with your research. So you can find a link to my Patreon in the description of this video. If you're watching this on replay, it'll be down there as well. The golf prop tier is what you want to join if you want access to all of this, not only just for the main slate like we've talked through here, but also for rounds 2 through 4. I will give you guys updated stat averages after every single round of action, also weather for Friday through Sunday, and every single slip as I'm taking it throughout the event. And last week, it was a plus 16 profit week in terms of units. It was one of the better ones that we've had of the year. Not the best, though. We've had an even better week than plus 16 units like we had there. And I'm not a volume better that just kind of like enters stuff for the sake of it. I'm as disciplined as it gets. I only enter stuff if I see tangible value on it. And while there are a lot of leans that I'd like to enter for round 1, I've kept it consolidated to 4 slips that I've gone with so far because of the fact that I want to keep it to the very best that I can find. And that's what you get out of my Patreon page. I'm not just some like degenerate bettor that just enters shit. Like that's the exact antithesis of what I am. I'm an electrical engineer by trade. That's what I did before I moved into doing this full time. I do this to try and find actual statistical edges on bets. And if it's not there, I won't bet. So like, for example, one of my members said, hey, are you going to enter anything for the DP World Tour in round number 1? And while I'd love to, I'd love to have more exposure to be able to enter, I'm not going to do it if I don't see an edge over there. And because I'm not as knowledgeable on that side, especially with the conditions this week that they have in, it's the British Masters. So at the Belfry is where they're playing at this golf tournament. I don't know if it's firm or fast there. I know the weather for round 1, but I'm not sure on a lot of those other things that I am sure about here for Eastlake. I'm not going to bet it until we have that actual data to work with. So if you want to see what an actual pro bettor's sort of process looks like, then that is what my Patreon page is for. It's also what this YouTube page is for. So subscribe to the channel if you guys felt like you learned something from this, as well as we'll be doing live streams for rounds 2 through 4 on top of this, giving you guys an idea of exactly how I'm attacking all these given slates. But that's all I've got. I appreciate your support of the channel as per usual, guys. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe, as I said, so you guys don't miss any of that content as it comes. And let's have ourselves a round number 1.